Hello, everybody. Welcome to our next talk. I get the pleasure of introducing you to Mr. Uri Shai. Uri Shai is an independent consultant, and he's going to deliver his talk on the challenge of IoT security. However, let me just give you a little brief overview. Independent consultant really doesn't do Mr. Shai justice, so I'll tell you a little bit about his history. Uri Shai earned his BSc in Electrical and Electronics Engineering in 1987 from Tel Aviv University. In 1996, he earned his Master's in Science in Telecommunications from the University of Colorado Boulder in the USA. Until 2006, Mr. Shai served in the IDF, that is the Israeli Defense Force, as an information technology and cybersecurity officer. From 2006 to 2014, he has held a variety of executive management positions in the IT industry. And since 2014, Mr. Shai has specialized as a consultant where he, I'm sure he'll tell us about it a little bit himself, but he consults on large building constructions for hospitals and schools for IoT and OT security. So without further ado, we welcome you, Mr. Uri Shai. Thank you so much for your time today, and we're all very excited to hear from you.
Thank you. Hello, I'm glad to be here. Yeah, I'm Uri Shai, and I'm an Israeli cybersecurity specialist. I am dealing with cybersecurity in civil, government, and military environments. I'm honored to talk today about the challenge of cybersecurity for the Internet of Things, known as IoT, with focus on privacy and safety, which I believe should be prioritized. I hope you'll find it interesting and perhaps you'll become, in your own way, leaders in this field. Just to put on share my screen.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, can you see that?
Yes, beautiful.
Okay, great. Okay. So I'll start with some terms, describe some common cyber threats to OT and IoT and their potential impact, present some realistic examples, and finish with approaches to cybersecurity for OT and IoT, some related challenges. First off, the word cyber, I'm not sure if you talked about that, originates in ancient Greece, where cybernetic is a word to describe something that is skilled in steering or governing. It implies that cyber has a dynamic nature of moving, leading, and changing, and indeed it is. Cyberspace is a relatively new domain where everything is virtually part of a huge global network. In daily life, cyber is related to the exploitation of the digital domain to achieve specific goals, whether by criminals, terrorists, political activists, or even countries. Exploiting cyberspace for specific objectives by anyone is essentially an offensive act and is named generally as cyberattack. So what is cyberattack and what types of cyber attacks are there? There are generally three types or three main categories of cyber attacks. The first is data breach that could lead to unauthorized exposure of sensitive information, manipulations, and alteration of information that may impact the fluent operation of essential systems and business processes. Sensitive information may include personal and private information, commercial secrets, intellectual property, and any information that is valuable for the organization, the business, or the individual. A second category of attacks aims at denying service availability. For example, causing a bank website to go offline for a given time frame, an act that might have a substantial impact on the bank's business results. The third category of cyber attack is kinetic cyber, meaning exploiting cyberspace to cause damage to physical assets and components and risk lives, property, and anything which is material. Recent research shows that 95% of all cybersecurity incidents involve human error. In my experience, cybersecurity is 100% about education and culture, relating to employees, executives, technical teams, maintenance contractors, etc. Cutting-edge technologies could never be effective if you don't educate your teams and control your supply chain. You probably know a lot about information technology, the world of networks, computers, users, software, etc. What is less visible for most of us is the world of operational technology, or OT for short, which deals with control systems, industrial networks, temperature sensors, data acquisition systems, and much more. You may find OT components in oil fields, train networks, water production facilities, electric grid, and other utilities. You may also find those much closer to you in elevators, building heating and cooling systems, which we call HVAC, physical security systems, and others. Historically, IT and OT are separate fields with different professions, but in the past few years, together with the growth of the internet, they are converging and a new field is evolving, the Internet of Things, or IoT. IoT bridges IT and OT, creating a new world where toasters, refrigerators, lamps communicate with internet shops, mobile apps, and utilities. IoT is connecting billions of devices that collect and share data over the internet as an infrastructure and as an application. IoT can be part of a tiny device, such as a pill one swallows, or a huge device, such as a passenger train you ride. Such interconnection adds a level of digital intelligence to devices that would be otherwise done. Basically, it's a machine-to-machine connection where users are not required to be involved. The Internet of Things is making the fabric of the world around us smarter and more responsive, merging the digital and physical universes. Practically, almost everything is becoming connected, computerized, and minimized. At home, in your car, at the industry, entertainment, and virtually any field of our lives, heating devices, vacuum cleaners, online vehicles, factories, assembly lines, physical security systems, implanted pacemakers, refrigerators, coffee machines, home cameras that supervise kids, keyless locks, and much more. The sky is the limit. It's very common today to use the term IoE for the Internet of Everything. And when you look at the numbers, it actually seems right. It's estimated by the end of this year, 2022, a magnitude of 50 billion devices will be used worldwide, expected to rise to 75 billion by the year 2025. The numbers and pace are unprecedented. Seemingly, it's great news. IoT promises to improve our lives and make it easier and comfortable. So what seems to be the problem? Well, a few problems are already very clear, mainly security, safety, privacy, and environmental issues. Naturally, there are risks, like with any other new technology, that may be good news, but it always brings new risks to disrupt or shut down services which are becoming essential, breaching individuals' privacy while exposing personal medical data, physical damage, environmental damage, and more. These risks might have an impact in the case of random or targeted attacks, human errors, or even technical failures. In other words, the Internet of Everything put everything at a greater risk. Just as there are cyber attacks on IT environments, there are unique attacks on OT systems. For example, on power grids. Most IT systems contain old devices like pumps, valves, cameras, and controllers, which were not designed to meet cyber attacks. For many years, there was very little awareness to the risk of cyber attacks regarding operational technology. Even in OT systems with newer devices, it's very common to find default passwords or ones that are easy to guess. This makes OT systems very vulnerable to threats in cyberspace. IoT devices inherit many flaws of old IT components and even in newer OT devices. Many IoT devices are not designed with any cybersecurity feature at all. Think of the physician who needs to remotely monitor a pacemaker implanted in a patient. What if the device is open to for anyone on the internet to connect and do harm? Let's see some examples that demonstrate the risk of cyber in the world of IoT. Here's a short video that shows a kinetic cyber attack on a vehicle. In this demonstration, a white hat hacker, a good one, is hacking into the car's internal network using a cellular data link between the car and the internet. I'm going to play this short video, and I hope you can hear it. But I think even if not, it would be fine. Okay, I'm not sure you can hear it.
I don't think we can hear, but that's okay. It's pretty clear.
Okay, I think it's clear, yeah.
Yeah, these guys are going to control that car essentially, right?
Yeah, that's right. So the reporter is driving right now, and she's of course in a playground, and now
and she's hitting the brakes and it's not braking.
she's trying to stop the car, and the brake doesn't work. So it's very nice, and she's pretty shocked. Okay, that's the story. Now, any modern car is equipped with dozens of microcomputers, sometimes even over 100. These devices are connected by a vehicle local network very similar to the office LAN. The automotive industry named it as a car area network, or CAN, and the technical standard called CAN bus. Another example is the Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan. In March of 2011, Japan was hit by a massive earthquake followed by a tsunami about an hour later. The earthquake had also caused the electricity production units to shut down automatically, which led to a power outage to the nuclear reactors. So the diesel generators automatically started. The generators were expected to produce enough power to operate pumps that push circulated coolant to the reactor's cores. The generators were flooded due to the tsunami and did not start operation. The loss of reactor core cooling systems led to 3 nuclear meltdowns, 3 hydrogen explosions, and the release of radioactive contamination in the area. It was a major environmental catastrophe with hundreds of thousands of people evacuated. Thousands still suffer cancer-related illnesses, and reported losses estimated at $500 to $600 billion. Why do I mention that epic disaster in this cyber talk? Well, because a sophisticated cyber attack would be capable of causing all the same events, disrupting power, disabling emergency generators, and cutting off the power supply to the pumps. These actions would have led to a nuclear meltdown in exactly the same way that the natural disaster did. This time, it didn't happen due to a cyber attack, but it definitely could have. The Colonial Pipeline is the largest fuel pipeline in the US. It moves approximately 3 million barrels of petroleum products daily. In May 2021, not a long time ago, President Joe Biden declaring a state of emergency due to shortage of jet fuel and panicked buying of gasoline and heating oil. This was right after the pipeline shut down all operations due to the cyber attack. How did hackers cripple the Colonial Pipeline operation? Via ransomware. I guess you have heard of ransomware attacks more than once because it has become very frequent and troubles nations and businesses globally. How did a major attack happen? Such a major attack happen? First off, it's very likely to assume that the attackers have been within the pipeline's network for weeks unnoticed. The attackers used a leaked password and username of an employee, which they found on the dark web. Then they injected malicious code into the pipeline's IT system, encrypting their billing network and holding them hostage. Please know that they initiated the attack on the IT network rather than on the OT, just because it was easier. Once they had control over the billing system, they went further to steal about 100 gigabytes of data and asked for a ransom paid in Bitcoin in return for reversing the system encryption. The Internet of Things bridges the gap between the digital world and the physical world, which means that hacking into devices can have dangerous real-world consequences. Flaws in software, even an old, well-used code, are discovered on a daily basis, but many IoT devices lack the capability of to be patched or updated, which means they are permanently at risk. Many IoT devices suffer poor access control mechanisms. A common problem is that all devices of the same model are delivered with the same default password, for example, admin or password 123. The firmware and default settings are usually identical for all devices of the same model. Because the credentials of the device are public knowledge, they can be used to gain access to all devices in that series. Many IoT devices are not easy to configure by the user in terms of the security features due to poor documentation, lack of knowledge, and other reasons. This makes it difficult for non-technical users to evaluate whether a device meets the security requirements. As of today, there are no comprehensive industry standards for IoT security. Some concerned governments have published their own guidelines around the security of consumer IT devices. The European Union Agency for Network and Information Security, ENISA, has published a gap analysis report about IoT security, referring to dozens of relevant standards that may address each requirement, but complying with so many standards is impossible. A dedicated standard should require devices to have unique passwords, that companies will accept calls regarding vulnerabilities, that manufacturers will explicitly state how long devices will get security updates, that employees employing encryption will be made possible, and network monitoring will enable to identify and mitigate risks in real time. With vast amounts of data, IoT is a potential huge privacy and security headache. Connected sensors are collecting extremely sensitive data, like what you say and do in your own home. Keeping that secure is vital to consumer trust, but so far the IoT's security track record has been extremely poor. The business strategy of many IoT vendors is not necessarily based on selling many devices, software, or services, but on the valuable big data about us they collect and trade. IoT data can be combined with other bits of data to create surprisingly detailed picture of you. IoT devices and related services should handle sensitive information correctly, securely, and only after consent of the end user of the device. In that sense, device cost is a major challenge, as each security feature means extra hardware and software that is extra cost. The most intuitive approach to secure IoT would be to adopt everything we know about cybersecurity from IT. Unfortunately, in most cases, it is not or just partially applicable and must be customized or require entirely new features. Information technology and operation technology differ in many aspects, but the main is that OT devices control the physical world, while IT systems manage data. Safety and availability of equipment and processes dominate in OT systems. Dealing with physical systems that must maintain stable values, such as temperature and rotation per minute, requires careful control. The Internet of Things involves the interconnectivity of physical object and data input and output. Thus, it has to take some cybersecurity principles from both fields. So IoT turns out to be quite risky. Shall we avoid it, using it? First, I am not sure we have a real choice here. It's a decision any user should make after being informed of the risk and measures to minimize it. A person who has a pacemaker in his or her body, which is connected to a monitor and clinic, are probably not aware that they are exposed to a potential remote attack. And even if they knew that, I doubt if they have a viable alternative. It's not realistic to expect the average consumer to manage such risks. Rather, it's a challenge for engineers and cybersecurity specialists. If you wish to influence and lead, you need to think about what you can do to build a safer world where the risks of IoT technologies are minimal. The challenge is to find an optimal balance between the need to prevent damage, the need for usable products, and the cost. There are more challenges regarding IoT security, but our time is limited. I'll just mention the need to secure big data generated by IoT, cloud-based IoT networks, 5G networks, and AI. I urge you to ask yourself, how would you like to contribute to lead the way to a comfort and efficient world, yet safer and more secure for the greater good? Thank you all and good luck.
Thank you very much, Uri. That was a very, very comprehensive, very detailed and simple, easy to follow and understand. I did not know that cyber was a Greek word that meant to steer. I never even thought about that. I did have one question, and our audience is welcome. You're all welcome to put your questions in the QA panel chat, and we'll read them out. But one question I had is, since it's such a new technology, I mean, it's relatively new and it's growing fast. When you're working now professionally in consulting, what are the simplest things that we can do to stay secure when we are using IoT? Because as you said, in many situations, there's not really an option. You kind of have to use it, or it's going to be used. So then, since we're going to be using it, what are the basic things we can do to be safe while using it?
Okay, it depends if you are an end user or you are a consultant. Okay, if you are a consultant and you have a new, let's say, new campus for a university campus that is being designed now, and the university's plans to construct a new building or a new set of buildings, you need to think of the threats that are going to be relevant to that project. Now, to do that, you would have to conduct a risk survey. You would have to look at all the plans, the electricity plans, the elevator planning, the construction plan, air conditioning, heating, cooling, etc. They are all based on networks that connect to controllers, which connect to physical systems, generators, pumps, water valves, and so on. So you have to look at what we call it assets of the project. You have to map them, to know them, to learn how they are going to be connected to each other. What is the hierarchy, the architecture of the systems? And now you have to put some principal guidelines deployed, like, for example, a firewall that would separate segments of the network of the building or the campus according to their functionality. For example, you would like to separate or do different segments for the air conditioning system and separate it for the water supply system, because they are functionally different systems and they are not related. So what you do is what you generally do in IT networks. You put in a firewall because it's a network, and the firewall would be defined. I would define the firewall with the appropriate rules to create or to manage the separation between networks, and to allow transfer of data between the networks if they need it. For example, eventually, to control all these systems, you need one building management system, okay, that controls or monitors everything: the electricity, the water, the access control, the physical access control, the physical security systems, cameras, and so on. And so you need one system for the manager, the person who is responsible for managing all these systems, and let him or her monitor all the systems at one workstation. To do that, you have to connect at least one server with a dedicated application for control, building management control, and connect to each segment of the systems you have in place. And this means that you have eventually to connect everything together, but you have to do it carefully. You have to allow only the relevant, only the minimal or the important data you need to monitor to go through the firewall and get to the building management control system.
All the same principles of secure coding, like least privilege and fail-safe defaults, all of that applies like 100% in these situations.
Exactly right. And then you need to, the principles are very similar, but when you go to the end devices, the controllers, the sensors, all the small thousands of devices you have in such a project, you face some practical challenges, like how to install an endpoint security product, software product on a controller which has a unique or a Linux operating system, which vendors does not necessarily support today. So you have to find, the right balance between the practicality and security.
Mm-hmm. So so that tension of, I can buy this device, but it won't support my endpoint security, but it's a better device for the job, but then this one will support it, but it's not a better device, that kind of tension is there essentially because it's not standardized. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly right. What we do, the general approach to do that correctly is what we call security by design. It means that from the first day of the project, the cybersecurity specialist or designer comes in. It's an engineer with many years of experience in such building construction projects and building management systems. And what they do is they put guidelines. They write the guidelines to the other engineers of the project and tells them that, for example, any controller or any active equipment you want to put in your project or in your system must be reviewed and approved by the cybersecurity engineer. Because, for example, if your policy is to isolate the building from the external world, what you would need to do is to make sure that each and every controller or active box would not have any wireless interfaces or like Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and so on. So and and even if there's no way to do it because manufacturers do not allow it today because they support everything, there's still guidelines that can be given to harden. We call it to harden this component, okay, to logically or through the operation system of the device, we can block some features that the vendor is providing.
So there's one general question from there's two, well, one comment, I think. One comment, I'll read that first, is Mr. Uri Shai, thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. And I think it's, there are prayer hands and a thumbs up. That's from Palaji R. And then Atul Menon is asking, how can one get started with IoT security? And I'm imagining Atul is looking for if you have any recommendations on good blogs or YouTube channels or any kind of good resources or courses that you would recommend to a new learner trying to get started.
Okay, it's a good question. Unfortunately, it's not well organized as you are used to in IT, because it's pretty newer. It's quite new. I deal today with many projects with IoT systems in constructions and campuses and so on. And it's amazing to see how they invest hundreds of millions of dollars in building new universities and new hospitals and so on, but they forget that they're really going to be vulnerable for cyber attacks. And recently, we have heard about many ransomware attacks on hospitals. Okay, and some were executed through the IoT, the medical devices that the hospital is using. Okay, so I can't refer you to, maybe later I can refer you and write you some sources that are good for as YouTube sources and courses that there are not many good ones as of now, but I will be glad to give you a list.
Okay, and wait, there is one more. Oh yeah. What are the challenges that are faced to protect the large amount of data that is being shared between the different end-to-end devices that are connected in an IoT environment? So could you speak any more about the data problems with all the data that's being collected?
Okay, it's a very important question, because like in the IT world, everything was evolutionary. It started with no protection on data, and then people understood that there is a problem of privacy and security, and started to employ encryption techniques, for example. But encryption techniques are complex to manage. You have to manage keys, you have to manage the protocols, the interchange of data. There are some logistics involved with encryption, and that should probably be the solution for the IoT. field. You would have to use more encryption. It's not easy because IoT devices sometimes have very little amount of computing power and memory. And to do encryption, you would need a lot of those, or you would need an internal minimized encryption model based on
We've
a
actually
chip.
been working on that. Oh, on a chip, no. I was going to say our master's students, some of them have worked on lightweight IoT cryptography for this reason, I think. But it's a very big challenge to figure out what is lightweight. When is it small enough? When will it work? And I'm sorry I interrupted. You were going to say about a chip.
No, it's okay. Yeah. So what happened in the past in the IT systems and in OT systems is that, especially in embedded systems, manufacturers just developed chips for security, and that make it with mass production. It made it pretty cheap and what's possible to integrate it into their products. Now, I think that in the IoT field, it's complex because there are, you know, as I mentioned, it could be a tiny pill that you swallow to monitor something in your body, and it could be an airplane or a train, which is very large, and you don't care about too much about energy and CPU. So in IoT, it's challenging because you have to prioritize where do you want to do that, and of course there must be a market demand for that, because if you have an electric kettle in your kitchen and you want to control it remotely, I don't know why, but you want to do that. I would guess that the manufacturer of the kettle wouldn't bother to, you know, to design an encryption chip inside a kettle. It doesn't make sense. It has to have a business-wise sense.
Good. I think we're running out of time, but we had one more question about current research, which I think we sort of touched on, and then is there any certification or curriculum? I think that's a good question. Are there any certifications that you're aware of for IoT security that you would consider good?
I'm afraid not yet. Okay. But I must say that if you are an organization that wants to deal with your IoT security policy and prepare one and write one, you need to, you can start with existing standards. I mentioned the ENISA report earlier, which they took the IoT security requirements, the general requirements, and they did a really nice allocation between the requirements and existing standards, security standards. For example, if you are an organization, you would probably want to comply with the ISO 27001 security information management system. I can write you down later on the link to the ENISA report. It could be very helpful.
Sure. That'd be great.
There is no industry or any other standard right now for IoT which is, you know, dedicated for that.
Okay, so it's an up and coming field, and the pot is still melting essentially. And I would guess that as you said, all IT starts off with no security, and IoT probably started off with not much thought on security. Just, can I make this thing work? And then the disasters and attacks come, and now we're running to catch up behind them. So it's the sad state, I guess.
Yeah,
but we can change
probably
that.
The way we learn.
Yeah, it's unfortunately the way we learn, right? I think we can wrap up there. Thank you very, very much, Mr. Uri Shai. We really appreciate your time. It's very fluid, clear presentation. I think for those of us who didn't know what IoT and OT was, we definitely do now. And those of us who knew a bit know a lot more. So we really appreciate that. And thank you for your time and your expertise. On behalf of all of Amrita and Team BIOS for the conference, thank you very much.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
So our next the next part of the agenda is, I believe, lunchtime for those of us in India and morning break time for everyone else. We will be resuming at, let me look at time, at 2:30 p.m., 14:30. There it is on the screen for you. Day 3, session 2, it's panel discussions. We're going to have 2 panel discussions starting at 2:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. The first discussion is on online child abuse. We can and must put a stop to it, societal and health impact. We have 4 distinguished speakers and 1 distinguished moderator. And our second panel will be on fighting cybercrime. And in this discussion, we'll have 3 distinguished speakers and 1 distinguished professor who's moderating. So both of these panels are going to be very good interactive sessions. So please, everybody do come back. See you after lunch and bring your questions with you for the panel as well. And we'll see you then. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.